speaking of Bruce Purkey, he has a movie called Suzume. It's an animated film, opens nationwide April 14th, directed by Makoto Shinkai, I believe, Shinkai. And I apologize to Bruce because I did not get to this movie even though I wanted to. Bruce, tell us hopefully the good news about Suzume.
Yeah, I think this is a good movie. I think it released in Japan. I want to say back in the fall, possibly November, December. I know that it was already released over there, but it hadn't come to America. And a few of our friends on CinemAddicts, and I forget. I'm sorry if I don't mention the right person, but we had a person on here who actually lives in Japan who it was their favorite movie of the year, and we kind of bounced back and forth between that and Belle. And they're different movies, so it kind of just depends on where your taste hits. But this director is very well known because of Your Name, especially. I think Your Name, for the longest time, was the highest grossing animated film of all time. I don't know if it's still quite there, but it was very, very high. Also, Weathering with You and a bunch of other stuff. Those two movies were, I think, his last two movies, and they were quite big in Japan. And this is the most recent movie, which is once again Suzume. So Suzume is our main character. Now, if you know his movies lately, especially, it's almost always some high school girl, and there's always some guy, and there's something happening. So that doesn't change in this movie. So Suzume is a high school girl. She's riding down the hill on her bike one day, and the mysterious handsome dude is walking up the hill. So all these movies are they start out kind of generic, but then they get different. So she meets him coming up the hill. He stops and asks her, or she stops and he asks her, is there a abandoned village nearby? And she tells him, yeah, there's an abandoned place up in the hills there that no one ever goes to anymore. And he's, moves on his way. And of course, she's starstruck and ends up trying to find him. She goes back to that village. And when she gets there, there's a strange door. And this door seems to go to nowhere. But if you open the door, she sees it looks like another dimension or something. But when she walks through it, nothing happens. Let's just say there's kind of magical weird elements, and basically there's these doors throughout Japan. If you don't keep them shut, it releases this, they call it a worm, but it's looks like a swirling tornado dragon or something. And if it gets big enough, it comes out of the door enough and falls on the ground, there'll be a disaster in that area. Earthquake, tsunami, something terrible will happen to that area. So he's basically sent around to shut these doors. Unbeknownst to her, she accidentally releases this thing, which essentially is like one of the linchpins that locks these down. So she's kind of released the ability for all these doors to be opened. And essentially the whole movie is her teaming up with him to go across Japan, almost like a travelogue, to shut these doors. But the main thrust of the movie is her adventure and her kind of teaming up with all these different people in different places in Japan as this girl who's just left her house. Her aunt is her mom. She doesn't have her mom has died. So her aunt is like distressed because she just disappeared with a strange dude one day and is making this trip all across Japan. And the charm lies within that trip. I also didn't mention that her main sidekick for most of the movie is a sentient three-legged chair.
Wow.
So that is something that is amazing about this movie. And you see how that happens, and it's pretty great.
This sounds like it could be depressing because of the whole element of tragedy will unfold if the doors are opened.
No, but I mean, it is and it isn't really. I mean, that's really just kind of the magical, I guess, nemesis of the movie. But the main thrust of the movie is her kind of this, like, it's almost like a travelogue, this cross-country trip of her, and she's meeting these people and having them have to help her on her trip. And there's a lot of, kind of friendships and comedy that ensues, especially because she has this chair that she's constantly having to hide or do things with because it's basically alive. And I won't tell you exactly how it becomes alive and what that involves, but there's a ton of fun there. And then they're also trying to chase down, I keep calling it Keystone. They're trying to chase down the Keystone that she released. Basically, these keystones are kept to keep this locked down, and the keystone has become this kind of almost like impish cat that is running all around Japan too, and they're trying to get that as well. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's a lot of fun. It's a good movie.
Okay, a lot of fun, good movie. The runtime's 122 minutes, a little bit heavy in the runtime, or do you think could it have been cut more, or were you fine with the overall 2 hour?
I was fine with the runtime. If I had any small drawback to me as compared to something like Your Name, I think that the central conceit of Your Name was much tighter and more concise as far as the, I guess I'll leave it at star-crossed lovers. If you remember that movie, I'm not going to say exactly why they're star-crossed, but there's a
Right.
reason. I think it's a very clear conflict. Whereas I think here, like I said, it's a little more free sprawling, and it's more about Suzume and her journey. And there is kind of a sort of a romance in there because they always have that in these movies, but that is kind of secondary. And I think that if anything could be kind of pared back, that would be it. It's probably the only thing that keeps it from going to classic status and keeps it down to more of like, for me, it's more of like a 4-star movie. But I think that if you like anime, especially these kind of big, giant, sweeping, epic kind of movies that especially this director makes, I think this is a good one of those.
Well, I mean, remember, Bruce, you, I think, was it a year and a half, maybe 2 years, maybe even sooner than that? You saw Belle in the theaters,
Hmm.
opens nationwide April 14th. And maybe I'm not like you and Eric. You guys will watch movies no matter what the quality. I mean, you guys love going to the theaters, but what is this ultimately a theatrical experience?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. This director Shinkai always. I mean, the visuals are always beautiful and stunning, and there's a lot of really epic shots. So this will be really fun to see in the theater for sure.
Okay. So, Bruce, putting words in your mouth, are we assuming 4 stars for Suzume?
Yeah, I'm 4 stars, and I feel like okay. I was watching this and I was thinking about it because there's a lot of stuff I thought back about it and I really enjoyed in it. And I give it 4 stars now, but once again, I think this is one that could go up because I think in some ways, and this is a weird comparison, but there's those movies like Big Lebowski, right? Movies that you watch and you're kind of wrapped up in the plot the first time through, but once you don't care as much about the plot, you just kind of enjoy the journey. And I think this movie might actually go up on repeat watches because you're not quite so worried about the plot and closing the doors and all that because you kind of know what happens and you can just kind of enjoy all of these interactions that happen with her along the way and just kind of love that about it. I think it would go up a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, Bruce, but I wonder with someone like writer director Makato Shinkai, with such classics as Your Name and Weathering with You under his belt, it's going to be hard for people who are not, and I mean who are anime experts, to probably compare the two, because those are two big movies from my recollection, to actually compare one to, I guess, right? You know?
Yeah, I think so. But I think that people are enjoying this one partly because it isn't quite stuck in the same pattern as those two movies. This kind of breaks out a little bit. And there's some built in lovable appeal to it with the cat and with the chair, which the chair aspect alone is so fun and so weird. If you just watch any clip with you where you see the chair, it's pretty great.
I am very, very sad that I did not get to see Suzume. Hopefully, the screening link is still alive. But again, opens nationwide April 14th. 4 stars from Bruce Purkey with room to grow.